is among the top university in United States. The webinar, Kimberly-Clark Distinguished Lecture 2003, entitled Vascular Design, Freedom, Evolution, Hierarchy, of Professor Bejan is officially opening the activities of the 60th Brazilian Interport Chapter 2003. Professor Bejan, that will occur at days 7, 8, and 9 in August in the facility of the Brazilian Cyclotron Light Laboratory here in Campinas. Professor Bejan was awarded the Kimberly-Clark Distinguished Lecturer from Interpor, International Society for Porous Media, to whom I also give my thanks to the opportunity. Professor Bejan was awarded 2018 Benjamin Franklin Medal for his groundbreaking pioneering in this interdisciplinary contributions in thermodynamics, constructural theory, which predicts natural design and its evolution in engineering, scientific, and social systems. He is the author of 30 books, 700 peer-reviewed top journal articles, Google Scholar H Index 109, more than 8,000 citations. Professor Bejan will say a few words first. Later on, we will follow his very carefully recorded presentation for about 50 minutes. And just after it, Professor Bejan will be available for about 20 minutes for an answer and question section, online in real time. Professor Bejan, the order is yours, and then we'll present the video.
Well, thank you, Eduardo, for the introduction, and I thank you, the audience, for making the time and joining this particular webinar. I have fond memories of Unicamp. I was there in 1986 for the PhD thesis defense of Osvaldo Trevisan. I was on his thesis committee, and I miss him dearly. I also miss Luis Fernando Milanez, who was also instrumental in that particular project. I have to thank, first of all, the International Society for Porous Media for this totally unexpected mission, which is to go around the world and talk about vascular design. And it is a pleasure to be doing that in your company today. You will see that contrary to the usual impression, which is that porous media tend to be full of interesting properties, but amorphous or difficult to draw, I decided to exercise my curiosity in the direction of the flow configuration and the effect of that on the performance or the objective that this particular material is supposed to serve. So that is my brief introduction. And now the movie maker is going to play the movie.
Oh, thanks. So I ask people to turn off to mute the audio, and then
first, I would like to thank the International Society for Porous Media for the Kimberly-Clark Distinguished Lectureship Award for the year 2023, which gives me this opportunity to present to you today's lecture on vascular materials and how to predict design evolution. First, words have meaning. This is the first thing I teach in my academic career. Vascular design. Vascular is an adjective. It refers to a feature of the image, which is that it has vessels conveying blood or lymph. This word does not come from biology. It comes from the Latin language, meaning it is a very old word. It is so old that it has been imported in many, many domains, as you'll see throughout my lecture. Design is also a Latin word, which means, but it's both a noun and a verb, referring to how to make a sketch, a pattern, an outline, or a drawing, because dessin in French means that, drawing, as does disegno in Italian. And the two photographs on the left make the point that vascular design is at all scales that we can perceive. The river delta and the human lung convince us that vascular design is everywhere. And because of this, vascular design is uniting the animate with the inanimate. And this means that vascular design represents all nature, which means physics. A few words about myself. All research, especially the original one, is autobiographical. My own involvement in porous media research has been a series of very fortunate accidents. I spent 8 years in MIT as a student. In my graduate work, I was designing and building and testing a superconducting winding that was bathed by flowing liquid helium and also rotating at 3,600 RPM. You see a sketch on the right. 2 years after that, as a Miller Fellow at the University of California, Berkeley, I had the great fortune to be hosted by Professor Chang Lin Tien, who introduced me to the science of flows through porous media, specifically Darcy flow. And then after Berkeley, I continued in that direction with fundamental studies on about other regimes, Darcy and higher Reynolds number, and also porous media with coarse structure. And particularly, I found myself attracted by the importance of flow configuration, which means design, and the evolution of that in the direction of endowing the system that relies on flow through porous media to have a greater performance. Along the way, with Don Neild in New Zealand, we actually wrote this book called Convection in Porous Media, which now is in the 5th edition. One example from my beginnings in this domain have to do with the natural convection in partial enclosures. It's called partial penetration of natural convection. You see here two things. The orientation of the system matters, but also the aspect ratio of the system decides whether the entire body is penetrated by flow. And that means that the performance of this cooling flow is dictated by the configuration, not only by the properties of the porous medium saturated with flowing fluid. Another example is the two-dimensional enclosure filled with a porous medium and heated from the side. That's the leftmost drawing, or in the middle, the heating is from below, as in Bejan convection in a layer of saturated porous medium. And on the right, the streamlines around a buried point heat source in a fluid-saturated porous medium. Speaking of autobiography, I'm amused to remember that I made this drawing, the one that looks like the eyes of the cat, with India ink and with many French curves, meaning by hand, not by computer. Now, the real story. Predicting design evolution, once again, begins with the meaning of the words. To predict, one needs a reliable mental viewing, which is called idea, of how something should be, and this is very important. To know how something should be is to know the future of that something before you look at it. And for that, you need a reliable principle, a law. To predict is theory, and theory is not to be confused with empiricism. In the blue domain, we have a single image review of where movement comes from an energy source that pushes an energy current through a flow architecture. There are many of these architectures in the blue. The architecture is actually an engine that delivers work to some entity that's part of the ambient and rejects the difference between input and output as heat. The next part of the physics is that nothing moves unless it is pushed. So you see here the engines in the blue domain, the produced work or power per unit time are in fact responsible for moving something on Earth. And that movement dissipates the power. And you can see the conservation of energy from left to downward in the drawing. You don't see the second law, except to notice that the movement from left to right proceeded to a distance. That was, of course, in proportion to the work that was delivered to the mover. The other part of the picture is that from time to time, the configurations that populate the blue domain and the green domain are morphing. They're evolving. They're changing all the time. What I sketched in the rectangular dashed box is true of everything that a human being can perceive. The air and oceanic currents, the animals and the vehicles, and many other things that appear today in neologism such as live matter, robotics, sustainability, life, and climate. The movement that's driven by power with evolutionary design unites the geophysical with the biological and with the social dynamics. And in other words, design is not one image. It is movies that are running simultaneously in the cinema of the observer. And so this reality has a one phrase summary, which I wrote in 1996. I call it the constructive law of design evolution in nature. For a flow system to persist in time, and that means to live in thermodynamics, it must evolve with freedom such that it provides greater access to what flows. I illustrated this particular statement with 3 images from the movie of a river basin on the floor of a laboratory. From moment to moment, the tree-shaped flow changes, but it remains a tree. And from left to right, that tree flows more and more easily, which means in this particular case, it is driven by gravity by shorter and shorter peaks of sand on the floor of the laboratory. So with this introductory set of definitions behind us, I come to vascular design and its usefulness. Well, vascular design is useful because, as you saw in the preceding slide, it facilitates the flow or the transfer of something that flows by diffusion on areas, in volumes, and in societies of animals and people. And the flow in the examples that I showed you so far is arborescent. Once again, this point of view of how the arborescent architecture is in fact predicted came from stating in 1996 the problem of how to facilitate flow from one rectangular area to one point. This is the problem sketched in the upper left rectangle. Well, the answer is by shaping the rectangle in a particular way, which happens to be the second rectangle in the column on the left. And the phenomenon is once again the change in the shape of the image in a particular direction and time. This development has been running its own movie, as you see in the lower row of images, toward more complicated arborescent architectures that facilitate flow from a rectangle to a point. Here are a few more examples. On the left, the domain is square. It generates heat, and the cooling is arborescent. That is, arborescent channels traveled by a coolant that enters through the center of the square. In the middle two columns, which show really a cut through a wall that's heated intensely from the left. The cooling enters through channels from the right. In one case, the channels are parallel slits. In the other, they are tree-shaped channels. And, well, those are arborescent architectures coming from the mind and then from computer simulations. So you can, in fact, admire these things in your own kitchen experiments. This is my own experiment in the kitchen with the coffee grounds from making Turkish coffee. This is on the inside of a funnel. You can see here that the draining of the water from the saturated porous medium is accompanied by erosion, and the erosion creates an architecture that resembles a river basin. Here we have computer simulations of the same phenomenon in every rectangular area. The water is falling from above, and it is discharged to the left through a erodible, saturated porous medium. So the flow becomes more intense near the exit, and because of that, the erosion is more intense near the exit. However, the channels are developing in the expected dendritic fashion, just like the river basin. If the original porous medium is uniform, as in the upper row, then the emerging trees of flow through porous medium are symmetric. If the original porous medium is randomly distributed with, let's say, erodible material interspaced with rocks and other accidents, the emerging river basin looks random. And that is an illusion because, yes, the original material was unknown to the flow before the flow started to erode the material. However, in every single case, the architectures are trees, and the principle that gave birth to every single image in this running movie is a single principle. This principle of evolutionary design with freedom, with the idea of facilitating flow access by morphing the architecture. The designer can fast forward the design. For example, if the challenge is to make a drawing of access from one point to a line, as in the upper left drawing, then in the simplest, that is starting from the fact that the shortest line between 2 points is the straight line, one can make the drawing shown at the top. The drawing comes from the elemental drawing in the upper right, which shows that if the rectangular area is fixed, but the shape of the area can vary, then the shortest path from one corner of the rectangle to the midpoint of the opposing side is present in the rectangle that has an aspect ratio of 1 divided by 2. So that means a diagonal channel with an angle of 45 degrees. If the problem is to engineer flow access between two parallel lines, then the solution, that is a first step in the direction of an answer, is to have the design from the top alternating with the same design upside down. And then this leads to the question of is the design with alternating trees offering greater access than the much simpler design of shown at the bottom, which consists of parallel channels connecting the top line with the bottom line. It turns out that the alternating trees are considerably more permeable to flow when the number of their levels of bifurcation is greater than 4. Presently, in the upper drawing, that the number of levels of bifurcation is 3. So the arborescent architectures are everywhere. For example, in every living organ, such as the muscle, that is a volume that's bathed by one stream entering as arterial blood and exiting as venous blood. As shown with red and blue, the body is inhabited by 2 trees, meaning a vasculature consisting of 2 trees matched canopy to canopy. Imagine 2 trees sharing the same canopy. That is the vascular design of the living organ. The middle and the right drawing show a much overlooked property of a flowing design. It is the property of sveltness, which is a number that accounts for the relative thinness of the channels that carry the flow. And you'll see very soon that thinness or lightness is very, very important when it comes to transporting the organ on a greater system, animal or vehicle, that needs that organ. Here's another benefit from getting to know vascular design. In evolution, if you read the news, there's a constant surprise that species vanish and the new species appear, meaning that evolution, most of it in the imagination of the biologist, is of 2 kinds: gradual changes, often imperceptible changes, accompanied by relatively looking dramatic changes. I mentioned species are vanishing. Well, on the left, I show two specimens of trees matched canopy to canopy. Two squares, stream enters from the left and exits to the right. In the top design, the channels are orthogonal. In the lower specimen, the channels are diagonal. The measure of performance of each of these organs is the pumping power or the pressure drop across the square. That is indicated in dimensionless terms on the ordinate of the graph, meaning that the better performance belongs to the specimen that has a lower value on the ordinate. And you see there are two curves which indicate that when the size of the specimen is small, that the n squared is the number of elemental little squares inside the specimen. So when the specimen is small, then the easier flowing is offered by the orthogonal design. And then there is a change to the diagonal design, an abrupt change, when the complexity or the fineness, the graininess of the specimen is sufficiently greater. Here are a few more images of this. Let's call it predicted architecture of the organ. In the upper element, the yellow generates heat, and then the heat is carried away by a stream that enters cold, shown in blue, and exits hot, shown in red. If for a larger domain that generates heat, the wise way to cool is to take 11 of those elements and assemble them in alternating fashion into the middle drawing, which is called a first construct. And then toward even larger scales or larger organs or larger packages of electronics, you can take 7 of the middle constructs and make the second construct shown at the bottom. Of course, in nature, these 90-degree angles between mother channels and tributaries are not happening. Those angles themselves come from freedom to change in the direction of offering greater access, and this is why the angles have relatively precise values if you know the principle of evolutionary design. And finally, this idea could be taken with ease in the other direction, which is a three-dimensional object. You can see here in the middle drawing the yellow element that's bathed in the manner that I've shown several times in the preceding slides. More elements fill a volume in the third direction, which is indicated in pink, and then larger three-dimensional bodies are bathed by a single stream with 2 trees matched canopy to canopy, as indicated in the construction in the column on the right. Vasculature is not necessarily tree-shaped. It can be much simpler. You can imagine a body filled with trees that have a single channel. That's why I introduce you now to vascular design consisting of spacings and inserts. For example, a body that generates heat from many platelets spaced uniformly through the volume and cooled by natural convection from below. the architecture has a single degree of freedom, which is the spacing between two adjacent plates. And it also has performance. If the objective is to cool the whole body, then the drawing that's the coolest is the one in the middle, and that is due to the spacing, which is the single degree of freedom. Now, the principle behind the spacing, if you imagine what goes on between the plates, is that the boundary layers that coat each plate do not interfere with each other. They touch only at the exit. And that means that the spacing is dictated by the thickness of the boundary layer, or that the length of the plate is dictated by the entrance length of the flow. More complicated architectures with spacings and inserts are shown here. Instead of a single length scale, as in the previous example, one could have 2 or 3 in the direction from left to right. The cooling of the body becomes more uniform. It is better, but also to the right, one runs without trying into the physics phenomenon of diminishing returns. Next, the sequence of drawings that I showed you shed light on our power to predict the evolution of such drawings over time. In the lower right, you see the beginning of the cooling of packages of electronics, which are bodies filled with coarse, porous media permeated by flow. In the beginning, the flow was driven by natural convection. You see the first segment of that rising curve. It has a slope that points toward the greater heat transfer density in that package as the dimension of the body decreases. So the direction from towards smaller bodies began with the first version of the design. Then, when natural convection was replaced by forced convection, the trend continued, but at a faster pace. And that the change in the pace was responsible for the dramatic shift from natural convection cooling to cooling provided by power, meaning a fan that pushes the coolant through the channels. And most recently, as you saw in the birth of the constructor law, the cooling is by pure conduction. There are no channels for fluid flow. So now we have in the upper square a design that's based on solid inserts. The trend continued at a even greater pace, and that was responsible for the second transition from the old specimen, forced convection cooling, to the new species, which is that of cooling by heat conduction. So miniaturization is another name for the direction of evolutionary design in this interesting combination of gradual change accompanied or interspaced with dramatic changes. Why is the designer and the user interested in smaller bodies with coarse, porous structures with fluid flowing through them? Well, because once again, those organs are useful on something else much bigger, the mover, the animal, or the vehicles. If the question is what should be the design, the size of the component, the vascular body, then there are many sizes one could contemplate, except that we know from thermodynamics that when the body is bigger, the channels are wider, the heat transfer surfaces are larger, and so in that direction, irreversibilities decrease, meaning the destruction of useful power, and that accounts for the descending curve in this drawing. In the same direction, toward the larger sizes, the fuel spent by the body for the purpose of carrying the component increases proportionally. So these are two trends that come in conflict, and at the intersection between the two, one arrives at the recommended size for the component, which is in fact the size of an imperfect component, one that is actually much better for the whole body that moves on the landscape. In other words, the animal design, the vehicle design is a wiser and wiser construct of imperfect organs. This is important to know. With this, we predict the unending future of both technology and medicine, you see. Now, why is this so-called preferable size of the organ decreasing over time? Well, it does because the descending curve slides downward as one era is replaced by another era. It slides downward because designs are actually improving. For example, in technology, the flow architecture gets better if one learns that the vascular design is better than some other designs. And because of this migration of the descending curve downward, the intersection is also migrating downward toward not only better performance, but also smaller sizes. So the future of a technology is in the hands of the person who knows the principle of design evolution everywhere. The largest domain that could use what I'm sharing with you today is that of structures for heat exchange or mass exchange. Heat exchangers are a very old and actually only 200 years old domain, but it is of course much older in nature. Although I have to tell you that what I'm going to show you next was not copied from nature, far from it. But it's important to know that what we're discussing is in fact in accord with flow architectures that occur by themselves in this direction of evolutionary design that began today's lecture. On the left, the drying of mud of wet mud in the wind. It happens with the emergence of mud cracks. The mud cracks are hierarchical. Everywhere you look, you see tiny trees of cracks in the mud, and they facilitate the evaporation of water from the wet soil. In the middle photograph, you see what happens in the last stages of boiling rice. This is right before it becomes rice Japanese style. You see the birth of vertical chimneys that occur for the purpose of vehicling the steam from the base of the pan to the atmosphere. On the right, an artist's cross section through a swarm of honeybees attached to a tree branch in India. The bees can withstand temperatures lower than 35 degrees Celsius. In the left half of the drawing, when the ambient temperature is low, say 5 degrees, the heat generated by the colony is dissipated to the ambient through heat conduction, through thermal diffusion. On the right, during a hot day, the bees rearrange themselves in order to permit the ambient air to rise by buoyancy through the body of the colony. And these channels are nature's way of facilitating transfer in a body with coarse pores. In the technology of heat exchanger design, this idea has, meaning one success story led to 2 or 3 more. From left to right, the designs with 1 degree of freedom were accompanied by designs with more degrees of freedom, and even more degrees of freedom in 3-dimensional designs, as in the rightmost drawing of a heat sink consisting of identical pin fins. Or in now getting closer to most common design of heat exchangers, cylinders in cross flow. The architecture, especially in the direction of getting smaller and smaller, looks like a multi-scale package of grains in cross flow. Heat exchangers are cataloged, let's say, historically in images of this kind. This is from the Second World War era, primarily due to cases in London and Stamford. The package of tubes in cross flow is complicated. In cross section, you see tubes of a particular arrangement, meaning that there are many arrangements in the handbook. Each tube is covered by fins. The fins are also an architecture with a lot of freedom to change, and the performance is summarized by those 2 curves. The upper one accounts for the pressure drop across the tube bank, or if you want a appropriately defined friction factor, and the lower curve accounts for the sister phenomenon, which is that of intimate thermal contact between coolant, meaning the fluid, and the solid surfaces. And the fact that both curves are descending to the right gradually as the flow rate increases indicates or reassure us that there is a quote analogy, unquote, between fluid friction and heat transfer. So this is the classical part of fluid flow and also heat transfer. It is even better known if one focuses on the fluid friction aspect, the top curve, for a single pipe with flow through it, where the coarseness is due to the fact that the inner side of the pipe is coated with the roughness or protuberances of a greater and greater size. And today this is known as the Moody chart, although the data and the drawing came from Johann Nikuradze in Göttingen in the Institute of Ludwig Prandtl. And Prandtl is the one who made this chart famous in the first edition of his extremely famous textbook called, in English it will be called Guide in Flow Theory. And now those of us who know the fluid mechanics of and how to treat it for flow through porous media, we can express this, present this image, the so-called Moody chart, in this dimensionless manner by using the permeability of the coarse pore structure. On the ordinate, a new dimensionless group that accounts for pressure drop. On the ordinate, the pore Reynolds number. and the upper curve is actually a bundle of many curves that account for tubes of, banks of thinned tubes in cross flow. Next, the skeptics among us may wonder, why is this vascular design evolution important to me? Well, here is the answer to that. Our own life is a vascular flow through the structure that occupies the landscape. Movement in the city, you see it here represented as tree-shaped flows on top of such flows through the grid of the city. The grid makes us blind to the tree-shaped flow, but the crowd that converges from the city to one point of attraction, such as the basketball arena, is that river basin of human flow. At the end of the game, the same flow returns to the area as a circular, if you want, river delta. So the vascular flow is our flow on Earth at the scale, but also at larger scale. These are the air routes over Europe. These are the routes, not the actual bodies flying, and they are a grid that looks more complicated than the city grid, but through the grid, people are covering the yellow territory in arborescent flow fashion. Not only that, but through those red channels, the bodies that travel are a population that is hierarchical. The airplanes and, of course, the natural flyers are, each of them represent populations consisting of few large and many small. In other words, hierarchy is the name for the bodies that flow through those channels that cover Europe, or the whole globe for this matter. These are the this is an image of peoples covering the Earth by thanks to aviation. The image comes from the condensation trails left by all flying aircraft. The blue shows that the whole globe has access to any point on the globe. However, just like the red blood cells in the circulatory system, to move from one point to another far away, the individual has to travel through the heart of the vascular flow architecture. And the heart, you see it, it is where it was born, initially at small scale in Europe and North America. So aviation is a design now with a predictable past, but also with foreseeable future. The conclusion is that the vascular design is the icon for the hierarchy in movement on Earth, and also hierarchy in the consumption of fuel that drives that movement. The next slide, let's start with the graph on the left, shows that the annual consumption of fuel is essentially proportional to the wealth of that particular country annually, called GDP, or gross domestic product. This is true for countries large and small, or groups of countries large and small. They fall amazingly on the diagonal. In the graph on the right, the same data arranged on a per capita basis. The cloud is once again positioned on the diagonal, but it is thicker, somewhat thicker, because of other effects that you can learn if you read the Freedom and Evolution. In any case, vascular design is the icon for the physics of hierarchy in movement, fuel use, and wealth. And finally, vascular design alerts us to who we are. If we don't know already, the artists are ready to awaken us. Here is the art of Juana Gomez, one of the leading figures in the new art current called constructal art. Her work is hand embroidery. You see the vasculature in everywhere on the human body, the brain, of course. And in other words, that each of us is a jungle of walking trees on the surface of the earth. Keep an eye on the hand, which she called ramificación. Yeah, the hand appears again here. Well, actually appeared earlier in a drawing made by Da Vinci in the lower left. And over time, and that's the icon of the naked human. Over time, the weak Homo sapiens was being attached itself, or it attached itself to artifacts, tools, the wrench, the intelligent arm, all in the direction of making the naked human body more powerful than it is, and for that matter, a better mover, and so on. And on the right, speaking of flow through porous media, the extraction of oil from deposits in the empty quarter of Saudi Arabia has evolved from the single well that's in the 30s as a vertical shaft to the arborescent well that explores the deposits in all promising directions. So that is how vascular design predicts the future of us and also the environment in which we thrive. To read more, I show you textbooks that I wrote about vascular theory and design evolution. This, by the way, the sequence of books also shows my own evolution in developing and understanding vascular design theory and application. And during the past 10 years, I've been presenting these ideas to the general public, which means that the books that I have here, in all of them, Design and Nature, The Physics of Life, Freedom and Evolution, and Time and Beauty, are, in my opinion, highly recommended to your students and to your children and to your grandchildren, especially to the young who stand to benefit from better and better decisions in life. Thank you, Eduardo. Thank you. And thank you for listening to this.
So thank you, Professor, for your time. So now you start the answering questions section online, real time, with Professor Adrian Bejan for about 20 minutes, more or less. So from the audience, are there any questions? Just unmute yourself, your microphone, and ask a question. If you prefer, you can post a question at the Zoom chat. Please, go ahead. So just to start, let me ask a question. Professor, could you please say a few more words about your, first insight, first click at, first inspiration at first glance of vascular design, and maybe what would be the next step in such evolution designing in human society? Please.
Okay, well, it's very important to ask about the origin of the beginning. This kind of click occurred very early in my life because of a coincidence. I grew up in the Danube Delta, so that is a vascular design. I knew that because in school under communism we could not travel, not even outside the city. There are no passports, so we in school were expected to draw maps of geography, geophysical features, including the Amazon. We drew maps and we looked at the images. At the same time, there was the beginning of a decades-long food shortage under communism in Romania. And my father, who was a veterinarian, decided to, this is in the middle of the city, to raise a few chickens in order to have eggs. And he had an incubator and a few other things, and had a box with a light bulb inside so that he could see the development of the embryo on the inside of the eggshell from day to day. And he would call me over and show me, and I saw this vasculature growing on the inside of the egg and looking just like the Danube Delta. So that was that's the origin of the very first slide that I showed you. I've seen that when I was in the middle school. That's before high school. In other words, the vasculature, the blood flow, I saw it, even though I'm not an optometrist to look at the configuration of the retina, you see, but it's the same thing in the retina. So then curiosity never dies, because if you see the same coincidence, if you see the coincidence once, you see it over and over and over again. So that is actually the origin of the story you just listened to.
Wow, fascinating. So from the audience, are there any questions, please? Murad? Natalie? I have another question, Professor. What would it be, I mean, if exists some kind of time scale of such evolution design linked to the vascular design? I mean, decades, centuries, millennium. I mean, more related to our society. I don't know if it's possible to relate something about it.
Well, again, that was my intention to show the connection. That's why I started with let's call them lifeless vascular structures, and then I continued into city traffic and aviation on the globe. In fact, the other name for vascular flow is hierarchical flow. The image, again, the artist who makes a vascular drawing puts together few large with many small. There's this harmony of flowing. It is peaceful. It is as if in equilibrium. The big river owes its existence to the many and more numerous smaller channels. The numerous small channels owe their existence to the big river, because the big river drains all of them, drains them, meaning it prevents flooding from occurring. And so hierarchy is the other name for this. And hierarchy, excuse me, hierarchy is the phenomenon, the image that occurs naturally according to constructed law. It occurs naturally because it facilitates flow. It makes flowing more easy. You see, as opposed to one channel or one size fits all, the flowing is facilitated through this special architecture that some would call multi-scale, but that's actually a very poor description. Multi-scale is if somebody throws balls of different sizes into a sack, that is a multi-scale assembly. No, the vascular flow is one. It is one organ or one organism that is flowing, meaning persisting in time, meaning alive, and it is just one, but it does have features that are organized in this very special and beneficial manner. And I can, you bring up social organization. I'll tease the audience with an example that should be familiar. Think about the movement of the soccer ball on the playing field. The ball is moving through a vascular architecture, one that's morphing all the time. There are channels through which the ball is flowing more frequently and faster. Those are the channels populated by the best players, especially those that are on the attack through the center field, and then feeding the same ball into this trunk of the tree are the defenders and the peripheral midfielders who touch the ball less frequently. So the movement is hierarchical. The organization of the game itself is hierarchical naturally because the whole group wants to win the game or to score. There's no revolution in a team, meaning revolt against the fact that very few players get the ball more often. Absolutely zero. Everybody's happy when the animal is breathing in and out properly. So that is a social organization in front of everyone in his or her lifetime, available from the stands, the stadium. So you can think about it this way, and then you begin to develop a feeling for why hierarchy happens naturally in society, why it happens naturally in your university, of course in the church, much earlier in the church, why it happens in every army, and on and on and on. But of course it happens in the ant mound, it happens in the bush, it happens in any animal society, really. And it happens for this reason, that it's not just the fact that being together is better for life than being alone. That goes without saying. But being together in a organized manner, especially when the group gets bigger and bigger, that is when organization is of paramount importance. And in fact, the history of civilization shows very clearly that, yes, in the beginning, when there were very few sapiens around, solitary life and hunting and gathering was the way to survive. But then as the population grew, clearly through all sorts of artifacts, most important fire, and then boating, and then agriculture, then the population multiplied, and so the groups became larger, families developed, trade, on and on and on. The history that we learn in school is really yesterday, just 5,000 years ago and after. That's not what I'm talking about. Big history teaches that no matter where you look, river basins, which are of course they predate the biosphere, and animal evolution, and then of course the Homo sapiens history, big history. Everywhere you look, you see this natural tendency. And in my work, I have the habit of teaching not only the meaning of the words, but also the importance of questioning, and the importance of questioning yourself. So, or the importance of humility in the art of making declarations. So I put some of these things I just told you, I put them to test. For example, I showed as an amateur that the snowflake, which is a arborescent architecture that's solid, people think nothing flows in it. Actually, it is a flow architecture that has its origin in the same principle. The flow is that of water vapor that becomes solid on the surface of the ice needles, and that process of solidification in the cold winter is facilitated by that kind of architecture. So that's one thing. At the smaller scale, it's inanimate, but it does look like all the other drawings. And then I had the audacity to pendulate in the opposite direction and ask why are celestial bodies not all of the same size? Why? Because the so-called primordial soup has been condensing, just like the snowflakes, condensing into bigger and bigger blobs. But the faster way to condense is when the blobs are hierarchically organized. Simple as that. And I continue with this sort of questioning. It's actually fun to, first of all, to question your own views, and then to discover that, gee, you know, I failed in the effort to disprove my views, you know.
For sure, for sure. It's amazing.
I failed. Sorry.
Oh, it's amazing how things are connected. I agree that flow is everywhere, in a tiny scale and a galaxy scale. The way that you look to it is amazing, Professor.
No,
So,
Eduardo, no. Forget Adrian. As I keep looking around and I talk to interesting people, it turns out that these views have been around. I mentioned Da Vinci. Da Vinci is famous for his paintings, okay? Now, in my life, he's famous for words that he was scribbling on the margin of his canvas and on the back of the canvas. These were comments on his way of thinking. Most of them were highly critical of contemporary society, and one of them was that in Italian, il moto è causa d'ogni vita, which means that movement is the cause of every life. You see, so there you have the definition of life, except that he was talking about animals and not the river Danube. But so he he can be excused for not putting the inanimate in the same bucket with the animate. But he made the point that no movement, no life. You see, so his observation is unifying. It puts the chicken in the same bed with Adrian. You see, it's the same thing, and so that's one statement. Another one you may have heard. Speaking of the end of my lecture, but there's a saying that have money will travel. Well, you see it at the end of my presentation that that movement where the consumption of fuel is proportional to wealth. You see, have money will travel. And if you remember what your grandparents told you, then you are, of course, if you remember what you learned in school, then you are much better equipped to think today in adulthood, especially in our enviable positions of professors. That's the beauty of the profession, is that we're speaking, we're having fun telling others what goes on in our heads. You see.
Wow, this is fantastic. So just to share some comments from the audience, let me invite people who are shy. Please, let's take this opportunity to ask Adrian for yourself. I have a lot of questions here. I was wondering because nowadays we are facing global warming, we are facing people growing, cities growing, vehicular traffic flow modeling by partial differential equations. And so in your design is some kind of vascular, we have flow. So how could you comment some words on this connection? I mean, the growing of people and global warming, and maybe some kind of reducing of the emission.
I'm a bit older than you, probably older than everybody. I smile because I've seen this movie before. By the way, the Gaul, you know, the predecessors of the French, who were pagan, were always looking at the sky, afraid that the sky was going to fall. You know, the sky was falling. When I was, I hope the listener, those present, pay attention to this bit of history. In 1970, which was a year of great political turmoil in the United States, several people, in fact, quite a few, made careers in science and economics, predicting the end of the world because of the population explosion. 1970, you see. And of course, it did not happen. Oh, by the way, and you're using the description exponential growth. Well, look, I'm trained in mathematics and I know the shape of an exponential function. It starts from, that is versus time, starts from time equals minus infinity, meaning it is always positive, e to the power t. It started from before the Big Bang, this population explosion, and it continues forever exponentially. Well, no, anything that spreads on a surface or in a volume, it spreads from a source, a point. It spreads in S-curve fashion, slow, fast, and slow, meaning this way. Let me do it your way, okay? Slow, fast, slow. The fast portion is the inflection. It's called viral phase, but eventually there is a plateau. According to the United Nations, global population is already reaching the plateau. In I think they say that in the year 2050 it will be 12 billion, and that's the end. Because just like the milk spilled on the kitchen floor, it can only spread that far because the power that drove this spreading flow is old news. In our case, power from burning fuels, fossil or renewable, that's not the point. The point is that the technology of moving stuff on the globe is 300 years old. Never mind artificial intelligence or internet or other things. These are ways of lubricating the channels better and better. But the power is an old technology, just like 10,000 years ago, agriculture was the technology that is in fact responsible for the first so-called population explosion. And so, no, I'm not at all impressed with claims that things are, you mentioned cities growing, or I don't care. No. In fact, you've seen this, by the way, in the most advanced societies, the so-called growth is not out of control. Population is in fact shrinking in most advanced countries, and in fact, Europe is very much an example in every country. Japan, now China, by the way, China is going has reached this plateau big time, yes, there will be growth in Africa and other places where this sort of spilled milk did not spill yet.
Professor Adrian, we have a question here on the chat by Alexander. Could you take a look on it, please? Or Alexander, if you prefer, please open your microphone and ask, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, please ask it, or if I don't understand it, I'll ask Eduardo to tell me.
Well, good afternoon. You can hear me?
I can hear you, Alexander.
Okay. Well, good afternoon. Nice presentation, but and thank you for the time. Well, I would like to ask about, you talk that as a style of life that we can apply the vascular design, right? So how habits or decision that we can make or adapt to have this harmony in the organism or in our life?
Eduardo, please repeat the question.
Okay, the question is, I will read. How can we apply this notion of vascular design in our decisions and habits to lead to a more balanced and harmonious life? And how can it be related to a specific design?
Well, okay, the easy answer is do what I do, which is keep asking questions and stay away from being an ideologue, and never subscribe to the one size fits all. In other words, give yourself freedom. If you do engineering design, give yourself freedom to make changes. You make changes if you question the architecture that's in front of you. In the beginning, there is no architecture; there's a blank page, so you're totally free. That is, in fact, when you're most powerful. It is when you begin to imagine what should be. So recognize that you're not only free, but you're powerful. You're powerful. You're somebody. You're not a sheep. You're not a follower. This is actually the beginning of the hierarchy that occurs in society. It occurs because most people in society do what I just said. They're acting out of self-interest, and they discover through this give and take all the time that, of course, they discover that their neighbors are doing the same thing, and unwittingly, the whole street comes to agreements without talking, such as they agree on where the street should be, where the school should be, where the church should be, and where the public square should be. So, but that happens naturally only when people are putting their not only intelligence, but freedom to good use. And this freedom I keep talking about, this F word, freedom, is extremely important in engineering design. It is, as it is, of course, in art. In art, the artist is a champion of freedom in this effort of expressing his or her imagination. I've seen the opposite of art growing up. Again, I talk about communism. There was, coming from the Soviet Union, the command that art should be called a socialist realism. It had prescriptions of what you could paint and what you could not paint. I was in art school after hours when I was a kid. That's where I learned how to draw. And there were these dictates on what is I apologize, dictates on what is permissible and what is not permissible. Well, that is a recipe for lack of progress. That is the record of civilization a la the 20th century. So yes, learn from okay, fine. In addition to physics and geography and engineering, get to know history.
Oh, yes. Fantastic. I have a question. I mean, in this sense of vascular design, the human brain, and nowadays we are looking to artificial intelligence, but I mean, it's not a vascular design, not yet. Can you see this from this perspective?
I saw that from childhood. The brain is a three-dimensional version of the vasculature on the inside of the egg or in the Danube Delta. In the brain, which is a volume, there is an immense number of flows of the same kind, all happening at the same time. Those flows are from one point to a huge number of points through sequential synapses, and each such flow is a three-dimensional tree, flow of electricity. The point is that the brain is firing point to volume in an immense number of ways. Each of them a tree, because you see that's why the cortex. The cortex is the place of the cortex is the canopy of all these trees. Okay, and so these connections are when they happen. This is the physics behind the expression that gee, I just made a connection. I just realized that I didn't that actually knew the answer to this, or I just realized that this image is familiar, or all these ahas in human life have to do what I just described. So yes, the brain architecture is no mystery to me. Those who do AI and want to know it, want to do it the constructed way, should talk to me. I'm a nice I'm a nice guy. You may even, by the way, Eduardo, you may even sell this idea as the next is the future of flow through porous media. Yes.
Who knows?
There you go.
Well, Professor. Well, I mark our time here. We have more than 20 minutes. If you have more time,
yeah,
please go ahead.
Yeah, I have to go. My wife was calling me.
So, Adrian, many thanks again for your time on behalf of the Brazilian chapter of Interpol. Many thanks. Hope to be meeting next time. So, okay. Many thanks. Many thanks.
All the best to you and to Brazil. Take good care.
Bye-bye. Have a nice day. Bye-bye. Hello, pessoal. So we finish here our representation with Professor Adrian Bejan. I would like to thank all the audience here. If anyone would like to ask something right now, please go ahead and do your question. Otherwise, I will finish the webinar here by thanking all of you on behalf of the Brazilian chapter of Interpor. And remember that the 60th Brazilian Interpor chapter will occur in presential mode at the facility of the Brazilian Synchrotron Light Laboratory next August 7, 8, and 9 days. Just go on the website of the Brazilian Synchrotron Light, take a look on the program, and hope to see you there. Bye-bye. Have a nice day. Have a nice week. Take care.